These examples here, we need to identify restrictions before we multiply and divide and cancel out. So when we think of restrictions, we have to think of all the parts that are dividing, all the parts that are actually dividing something. So here, this expression is dividing that numerator up here. This says divide, so this technically is a divide expression. And this is under a denominator, so this is also a divide expression. So for all three parts there, we have to be very careful. All those parts represent some sort of divide. We cannot have a zero factor in any of those three parts. Okay, so we have to be careful with this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor the polynomials. Okay, so we end up with x minus 1, x minus 1. Here we end up with x plus 1, x plus 2. Okay. I'm going to flip this to a multiply. And so I'm going to put the denominator here into the numerator here. Okay, so we're going to end up with x plus 5, x plus 2. Okay, so although we put this into the numerator, because it's a divide, at some point it is a divide, so we still have to worry about the restrictions from this expression. And here we're going to end up with x plus 5, x minus 1. Okay, so I'm going to highlight all those parts again. Okay, so this is a divide, this is a divide, this is also a divide because it was a divide here. So all those parts are then going to have to be considered when we do our restrictions. So x is not equal to -1, -2. Here we have -5. From here we have -2. That's an overlap, so that's actually redundant. And same with these ones here, -5. And here we're going to have +1. Okay, so these two happen to be redundant, so we can, if you want, you can eliminate those. You can leave them in if you like. Okay, so they don't have to exist there. But if you want to leave them in, it's no problem because they do show up twice. So at this point, once we've established our restrictions, we can start figuring out what is going to cancel. So here we have a times divide. We have a times divide. We have a times here, a divide here. Sorry, opposite, divide here, times there. So what's left over then is going to be x minus 1 in the numerator, x plus 1 in the denominator. And these are the restricted values. Okay, some of them actually disappear because they cancel out, but they are still restricted values. And in fact, later on when we get into calculus and in fact into graphing these, we will see what's actually happening when we cancel factors that are restrictions, okay? Because something actually does happen at that point. Okay, so here we have just a multiply, so we just have to worry about our restrictions in the denominator. So that's a divide here, that's a divide here. Okay, so looking at those, we're gonna factor this. So factor the greatest common factor first here, and we're going to end up with x plus 3, x minus 2. Okay, so we end up with x squared plus x minus 6. The denominator here will factor the greatest common factor of 7y, and we're left with x plus 2. And again, we can write the times, but really this is just one big fraction. So I'm just going to write it like this. So we're going to factor, let's factor that 7 into 7 times 4. We have a xy. And we'll factor the common factor of 3 out, and we're left with x plus 2. So there's some common factors there that are going to cancel out. And again, notice these are all multiplication pieces. There's no minus in between there. Okay, so those are all factors. What if we can't have minuses in there though? So since there are a lot of factors, make sure you're very clear what parts are factors. For here, we're going to factor out the 4x common factor, and we're going to be left with x plus 3. And again, those are all multiplying pieces. The denominator is going to give us our restrictions. Okay, so our restrictions for x are going to be x is not equal to -2, 0, -3, and we also have a restriction for y. Y cannot be equal to 0 because we have a y factor there. So we've got all our restrictions now. We are able to cancel out our common factors. Again, we have to make sure that this is all multiplication, okay? Because if we have a plus or minus in there, we cannot cancel factors. So that everything is connected by multiplication. So those common factors cancel out. X plus 3 factors cancel out. Times x cancels out. Times y divide y. Okay, and then we also have that factor of 7. It's starting to get a bit messy here, so let's simplify this and see if we have any more factors left over. So here I have 4 times 3 times x minus 2. Okay, so we do have an extra factor of 4 here, which I'll simplify at the end. We just have a factor of 4 left over here. These cancel, so our final answer is going to be 3x minus 1, and we're left with a factor of 1. Anytime you cancel multiplication and division, you're always left with 1.